Morning, everybody. I hope you're well. Uh, Today, we're going to talk about a concept that has uh, given me a lot of understanding of myself, observation angle of myself, let's say, as well as help me understand how to navigate and work with other people and understand maybe what their motives are, or maybe even like motives that are hidden to them, or um, help them maybe bring something to the surface that they can't see. And the idea is really, it's best expressed in what's called the Benjamin Franklin effect. And the Benjamin Franklin effect is basically Benjamin Franklin said that if you want someone to like you, if you want to be in their favor, get them to do something for you. So, in other words, rather than being nice and trying to appeal to them and trying to get them to like you in that kind of way, the easiest and quickest way is to get them to do you a favor. And what he understood is what cognitive therapy is really all about. If you go out and you look up cognitive therapy, it's a very effective form of therapy for a lot of people. And the idea is that the mind doesn't like incongruencies, does not like when things aren't sort of smooth and rhythm and where they're supposed to be. So, in other words, when you get that person to do you a favor, let's say they didn't like you or they felt ambivalent towards you. Well, in their mind, they're going, why am I doing this person a favor? And they resolve it by telling themselves, oh, this guy's a typically good guy, or they're a nice person, or I'll be able to whatever it might be. But what they're doing is they're removing the incongruency from their mind, doing a favor for someone they're ambivalent or maybe worse feel bad about. That incongruency, because of the mind's need to have smoothness, it resolves it by adjusting the feelings. In other words, it resolves it by adjusting what it has control over and what it's affected by. Again, feelings. And a lot of what we talk about, a lot of what we're going to go through this whole course has to do specifically with feelings. Um, our life is a life of feeling. And that's what goes on. When there's an incongruency, there's a weird feeling, and the mind wants to sort of smooth it out. I mean, think about the times where you've been lied to. Likely, when you were deceived, likely there was something that told you something isn't right here. There was some incongruency. And rather than sort of dig deeper into the incongruency and discover what's really there, you just chose the easier route of, well, I like Bob, or this is an okay situation, or I'll deal with the consequences. Whatever it is, you did something to smooth out that moment. And likely you regretted it later on when the deception occurred or whatever it may be. And this, again, it's an evolutionary development of seeking incongruencies in your environment and incongruencies in yourself. And so I think seeking incongruencies in yourself is more of the, let's say, Homo spiritus man, the man in search for enlightenment, than it was maybe the primitive man's concerns. The primitive man's concerns most certainly had to do with the environment. If, as we were evolving through the grass plains of Africa, if there was a change or a difference in something that was going on in the environment, it could have serious impact on our lives, our families' lives, and on the survival of our line. And so, of course, from a natural standpoint, we're very, very sensitive to any changes in the environment. And the same with our mind. Our mind is a rhythm machine. There's a great video out on TED of a drummer who discovered that if he did this rhythmic technique right before he went to bed, he was able to have more refreshing, more fulfilling nights of sleep. And what he had discovered or come across was this idea of the rhythms that we have within our mind and even our body, our respiratory rate, our heart rate. And if you're familiar with cranial sacral therapy, they actually diagnose through the rhythm of the nervous system. And so almost everything that it's hard for me to know something from the natural world that doesn't follow a rhythm. And so when something's out of rhythm, we're very, very attenuated to that. And what's happened is oftentimes through abusive situations or through cultural propaganda or through other, let's say, hypnotic forms of messaging, we are been convinced or lulled or numbed to some, certain incongruencies. In the political world in America, you have a group of people who, every time I look at either side of it, it seems like this group of paradoxes or incongruencies. And when I want to go deep with one of the people that feel that group represents them, anytime I bring up those incongruencies, they're actually sort of just ignored or poo-pooed away or not really acknowledged. And that's confirmation bias, of course. And so, again, there's all these tools that we have to be able to remove the incongruency from our mind. And I want to say they're lazy tools. They're not really removing the incongruency. What they're doing is they're recreating our perception of reality for us so that we can maintain the congruency we wish to see. And ultimately in life, I can't remember if we've talked about this before or not, but there's a gap. I call it the sanity gap between, let's say, what's actual and what's real. So dragons are real. They may not be actual, but you can think of them, you can draw pictures of them, you can make figurines of them. So they're real, but they're not actual. And people oftentimes will create realities in their life that aren't what's actually going on. And that reality is really oftentimes a culmination of the experiences and the situations. They may be traumatic, they may be joyful, but whatever they are, that's what this reality is all consisted of. These beliefs and logic systems that have been created as a result of these experiences. And if we don't sort of take this deeper look in ourselves, we just take it for that's the way the world is. Even if there's an actuality that's different than the reality. So I can't remember the Westminster Baptist, I don't remember who the people were, but they're a very extreme religious group. And they live in a particular reality. And for them, this is as real as it gets. For us from the outside, we can see the actuality and the hypocrisy and, let's say, a lot of the incongruencies that are within their belief structure. And as we all know, it's much easier to see everybody else's incongruencies than it is our own. And we have to feel them out. We have to be willing to be uncomfortable. We have to be willing to admit we're wrong. As we talked about in a previous session, the power of being wrong and vulnerability really plays out in this discovering what may be a confirmation bias or a reality that's really hindering you because it's so far removed from actuality. The further, we all live in our own reality. None of us live in pure actuality. I get that. But when our reality is close to our actuality, then we typically have a much happier life. The further that these two start to separate, that's what I call the insanity gap, right? That's the insanity that we experience in our lives. And so this idea of incongruency and congruency, if we just go searching in our own mindset as we operate through the day, and again, multiple eyes, creating the situations, those cues that enable you to be able to make these observations, we use those tools. And in this particular lesson, what we want to look for is incongruencies. And it's going to be much easier to, in the beginning, discover incongruencies about the lies you're being told or the deceptions that are being fed to you. you're going to have, it's a much less threatening or much less intensive exercise to see or to feel how the world's deceptions create incongruencies in your mental state and discover what those incongruencies are. This will be a very powerful tool for you as you operate through the world to be able to um, smell out someone's bullshit, to be able to say avoid or make a decision um, earlier than later, before you step into the shit, before the problem becomes big, whatever it might be. That's really the idea, is to start to listen to this inner voice and discover where is the incongruency. Is the incongruency in something I'm being told or shown or persuaded? Or is the incongruency inside my own reality? And as we start to look for these incongruencies and congruencies, we start to realize that we're much more subject to believing our own bullshit than we think we are, and being deceived by other people's bullshit than we think we are. And what we've really become really good at is sort of ironing out whatever incongruencies it may be. I mean, if you think about it, think about the last sort of argument you had with someone, intense argument. And when you left it, you were working out in your mind the conversation, and you were reliving a lot of it. And you started saying things differently. You thought about what you could have responded with. And you needed to do this so that the mind could find some congruency. And oftentimes it settles on a version that it's your truth, but let's not call it the absolute truth or the actual truth of what happened in that moment. And again, depending on the difference between your actuality and your reality, it really is how insane will how much strife is this going to create for you? And so this is really why the exercise is great, because as you start to understand your own incongruencies, your own bullshit, and you're able to detect other people's incongruencies, you can then start to use those as leverage points. In other words, as many of you know, I've been in sales for a long time. And, there's an asterisk next to that commandment that says, thou shalt not lie. There's a little asterisk there. And when you read at the bottom, it says, except to salespeople. We all feel it's absolutely okay to lie to salespeople. I get lied to all the time. And it's okay. I understand. I realize what's going on. I realize that because of the projection of my motives onto me from the prospect. In other words, because the prospect thinks all I care about is a check, and they're afraid of that, they're afraid to be honest with me. No worries. I get it. I understand. And so as we talk and we start to go down the road and they explain something to me, I am actually listening for the incongruencies. I'm listening for when they tell me something early in the conversation and then betray that when they say something opposite later in the conversation. And when they do that, I ask them about it. I'll say, well, earlier you said this, but now you're saying this. I'm a little confused. Can you help me out? What happens at that moment typically is because the person wasn't really prepared for that question. They shifted eyes from the beginning, and now they're giving me a different version, or a different eye is sitting in front of me. And when I bring out the two eyes and I show them to each other, typically what happens at that moment is the truth comes out. The prospect will tell me something along the lines of, well, all right, well, here's what's actually going on. And so this being able to understand incongruencies and understand and look for the bumps in conversations, look for the bumps in relationships, look for the bumps. It doesn't mean, I can't look at one bump and go, oh, this is what it means. It's like when you're reading body language and you're looking for deception, you don't look at just hand to the mouth or looking one way or whatever it might be. You're looking for clusters of behavior. And it's the same with these incongruencies. I'm looking for clusters of behavior that would be indicative of something that's going on. And when I ask about someone's, what appears to be an incongruency to me, it either allows them to explain to me what I may not have understood, or it reveals something that they were wanting to keep hidden. Might be some other options too, but you understand what I'm saying. Is that by using this concept of understanding incongruencies, of looking for that bump, I'm able to use that bump to my leverage to get to the truth of the moment. Ultimately, it's really what we're all looking for. Ultimately, I believe that none of us want to be deceived. None of us want to deceive ourselves. All of us are striving and looking for some form of truth. Truth is definitely elusive. And it's a vigilant effort. And I think with understanding this idea of incongruent behavior or incongruent words or incongruent statements, you'll be able to start to recognize in your environment when these situations occur. And the assignment for this particular lesson is when you see an incongruency, when you see someone saying one thing at one moment and then later on doing something different. Remember, it's more than likely multiple eyes, right? This eye says something, this eye says something. So, ask them about it. Whatever it may be, ask them about it. And, I have a rule, if you assume it, ask it. And this is what happens a lot of times. When we see the incongruency in someone else's behavior or their words or their message or whatever it might be, what we do is we just assume something that allows us to smooth it over. What I'm doing is I'm asking you, don't assume at that moment. When you see that incongruency, just ask them, hey, do you mind? I'm a little confused. Would you please explain to me? Earlier you said this, and now you say this, and I'm not sure I see how they fit. And I personally think that you'll be pleasantly surprised and happy with the results that you start to get when you start to ask about the incongruencies that you see in other people's messages. So, what I would, hopefully you're still doing some form of the multiple eye exercise of the cues. And what I might do is use this incongruency exercise as one of my cues. When I see or hear or whatever I see in a message or hear in a message or whatever, perceive in a message, some incongruency, I'm going to stop. I'm going to check my own limbic system first. What am I feeling? My mental state, what am I thinking? My action state, what am I doing? And then I'm going to ask them about the incongruency. So, I hope this lesson has been useful. I don't give any of these lessons with the idea that I'd be wasting your time. But this one in particular, I think, is huge. And, we haven't really gotten into the nurturing method really, really strong, and we're going to get into that soon. But the nurturing method allows you to ask people about their incongruencies. So a lot of you who feel like, well, I don't really feel comfortable asking people or confronting people about the different things that they may say. Hold on. We're going to get to another class where when you start to use the nurturing method, you'll start to understand that you can go much deeper and much more intimate and personal with people, and they'll tell you much more about themselves and the situation and what their intents are. And ultimately, in any relationship, it's really truth that makes it work. Truth is the gold standard of a relationship. So that's really the goal. On that note, I hope you guys have a fantastic day.